Have you ever been stuck in a conversation with absolutely no idea what to say next? You meet someone new. Maybe it's at work, maybe it's at a party, maybe it's a family gathering, a networking event, or even a first date. Everything starts fine. You exchange the basics. How are you? What do you do? Where are you from? And then it happens. That awkward silence, that uncomfortable pause where both people suddenly become fascinated by their phones. You start searching your brain for something clever to say. Nothing comes out. The conversation dies. And afterward, you replay the whole thing in your head wondering what you could have done differently. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Most people think they're bad at conversations because they're shy, or because they are not confident, or because they're not naturally charismatic. But what if that's not true? What if the people who seem effortless in conversations aren't naturally gifted at all? What if they're simply using a few skills that anyone can learn? Because here's the truth. Great conversations are not a talent. They're a skill. And like any skill, they can be learned, practiced, and improved. The good news? You don't need to become more outgoing. You don't need a better personality. And you definitely don't need a list of clever lines to impress people. You only need 3 simple principles. Master these 3 principles, and you'll never truly run out of things to say again. Let's start with the first one. Ask intentional questions. Most conversations die because people stop digging. Imagine someone says, "I went golfing over the weekend." Most people respond with, "Oh, that's cool." And then silence. The conversation ends right there. But someone who understands conversations sees an opportunity. Instead of ending the conversation, they open a new door. They ask, "Where do you usually play? How long have you been golfing? Do you play competitively? What got you into it?" Notice something important. You don't need to care about golf. You don't need to know anything about golf. You simply need to be curious enough to explore the topic. And that's where most people get it wrong. They think conversations are about talking. They're not. Conversations are about discovery. Every person you meet knows something you don't know. Every person has experiences you've never had. Every person has a story. Your job is to uncover it. The moment you become curious, conversations become easier. Because curiosity creates questions. And questions create momentum. Here's a quick question for you. Do you sometimes struggle to think of follow-up questions during conversations? If so, comment yes below. I'd love to know. Now let's move to the second principle. Listen more than you speak. This one sounds simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Most people aren't listening. They're waiting. They're waiting for their turn to talk. While the other person is speaking, they're already planning their next response. They're rehearsing. They're preparing. They're worrying about sounding smart. And because of that, they miss half of what's being said. Real listening is different. Real listening means paying attention without mentally interrupting. It means focusing on understanding rather than responding. Because when you truly listen, people give you everything you need to keep the conversation alive. They give you clues. They give you details. They give you emotions. And those details naturally create better questions. Imagine someone says, "I recently moved here." Most people immediately switch the topic back to themselves. But an active listener notices the opportunity. They ask, "Where did you move from? What made you decide to move? How are you liking it so far?" Suddenly, the conversation has direction. Not because you're clever, because you're paying attention. One of the most powerful quotes about communication says, "Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply." Don't be that person. The world already has enough people waiting to talk. Become the person who genuinely wants to understand. People remember that, and people appreciate that. By the way, which do you find more difficult? Asking questions or listening carefully? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm curious, and if you're getting value from this video so far, hit the like button. It helps more people discover content like this. Now let's talk about the third principle. Find common ground. This is where conversations stop feeling like work and start feeling natural. Human beings connect through similarities. We trust people who understand us. We enjoy people who share our interests. And we feel comfortable around people who have similar experiences. Sometimes common ground is obvious. You support the same sports team. You enjoy the same music. You work in the same industry. You grew up in similar environments. Other times, it's hidden. And that's why the first 2 principles matter. The more questions you ask and the better you listen, the more likely you are to discover something you both connect with. Maybe you discover you both love traveling. Maybe you've both lived in the same city. Maybe you've both struggled with similar challenges. The moment you find that shared connection, everything changes. The conversation becomes easier. The energy changes. Both people become more engaged. Because now you're not talking to a stranger. You're talking to someone who feels familiar. This is why the best conversationalists aren't the funniest people. They're the people who make others feel understood. Now, let's be honest. Not every conversation is going to flow perfectly. Some conversations will still feel awkward. Some people won't be interested. Some discussions will hit dead ends. That's normal. And it's something many people need to hear. Silence is not failure. Let me say that again. Silence is not failure. It's simply space. Most people panic when silence appears. They rush to fill it. They start talking just to avoid discomfort. But confident communicators don't do that. They understand that a few seconds of silence won't destroy a conversation. In fact, sometimes silence makes conversations better. It gives people time to think, time to reflect, time to respond honestly. The more comfortable you become with silence, the less pressure you'll feel during conversations. And the less pressure you feel, the more natural you'll become. That's one of the hidden secrets nobody talks about. Great communicators aren't always speaking. They're comfortable not speaking. Now, here's something important. Most people walk into conversations asking themselves, what should I say next? That's the wrong question. The best communicators ask, what can I learn from this person? That single shift changes everything. When your goal is to impress people, you become anxious. When your goal is to learn from people, you become curious. And curiosity is infinitely more powerful than confidence. Confidence comes and goes. Curiosity stays. The goal was never to become the most interesting person in the room. The goal was never to sound smart. The goal was never to impress strangers. The goal is to become genuinely interested. Because genuinely interested people naturally ask questions. They naturally listen. They naturally discover common ground. And when those three things happen, conversations flow effortlessly. So the next time you're talking to someone, remember these three principles. Ask intentional questions. Listen more than you speak. Find common ground. That's it. No tricks. No manipulation. No complicated psychology. Just genuine curiosity. Now, I want to hear from you. What's the biggest challenge you face in conversations? Running out of things to say? Feeling nervous? Overthinking? Comment below and let me know. I read every comment. And if you're interested in psychology, social skills, self-improvement, and becoming more confident in everyday life, make sure you subscribe. Because every week we're breaking down practical skills that can genuinely improve your life. Remember this, the people who seem amazing at conversations aren't special. They aren't magical. And they weren't born knowing exactly what to say. They simply learned how to be curious. And when you're genuinely curious about people, you'll discover something incredible. You'll never truly run out of things to say again.